Hello, and welcome to another episode of PLM Talks. Today, I am actually here with a friend of mine, Brenda S. Tolian. Again, making sure to pronounce those last names correctly. She is an author of the book we will be talking about today. It's a collection of short stories called Blood Mountain, and her short fiction has also appeared in Haunted MTL.com, 101 Proof Horror, Consumed Tales Inspired by the Wendigo, The Jewish Book of Horror, and Twisted Pulp Magazine, Issue 3. She is a member of the HWA, the AWP, and the Angela Carter Society. As a graduate of Adams State University, Regis University, the MFA, and a doctoral student of literature at Murray State University, Brenda also writes academically on subjects such as postmodernism, Vladimir Nabokov. I should have checked that name too. I feel like that happens so often. And the female body within horror. She's a lead instructor of dark fiction with Alchemy Writers Workshop in Denver and one of a trinity of directors at Ouroboros Screaming. She now calls New Orleans home after a long stint in the Southwest. Welcome, Brenda.
Thanks for having me on. Good job with all those difficult words I threw your way.
I know that was a lofty resume there.
Yeah. First off, in the morning, say Ouroboros 3 times.
Ouroboros 3 times fast. Yeah, I saw that word and I was like, oh darn. My greatest fear, like stumbling over the introduction.
Yeah. Well, at least you aren't calling yourself a co-horse like Joy does to me on my podcast.
I mean, but I love that. You could say you're
I
a
do
cohort, you know?
Yeah, I actually love it now. Like it's kind of disappointing when she doesn't do it. Now she'll have to start doing it all the time.
Yeah, you'll just have to make it your brand. Which
Yeah.
by the way, this is it's not just the Burial podcast, right?
Burial Plot Horror Podcast.
There we go. I knew I was missing a word and I was like, why didn't I write this in my introduction for you? The Burial Plot podcast that you host. So let's jump right in. Now, first, like this is kind of a heavy topic to start with, but we like to go heavy in the horror industry. In the bio, we mentioned how you write academically about the female body in horror, and obviously we're both female identifying horror writers. Can you expand on that and how it affects your own writing, your own fiction writing?
So that lens that I choose to do not only my own fiction writing but also my academic writing through is trying to give voice to those of us who are often silenced in the room. We don't get as many publishing deals. We don't get as much acknowledgement in academic circles, especially when it comes to horror writing. And then when, as you know, in books, females are often portrayed via the male gaze, even if they're trying to write from a woman's POV. So it gets broken up and added to with experiences that aren't genuine. And so I think as female writers, we have a lot to say. We have many, 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 many years of a lot to say stored behind this dam that hopefully gets broke down and the floodgates open and a lot more voices, come forward. There's a lot of things I chose to put in my book that some people have called horribly grotesque, but they really deal in issues that women unfortunately deal with daily. I mean, not necessarily a crazy cult on the mountain or something like that, although lots of women do deal with that too. But a lot of the things centered around our bodies, around giving birth, around abortion, around birth control, around abuse and assault and and all of those things, and I think it's important for women. I'm not saying all women have to do this, because you definitely have people come at you um in negative ways when you try to speak some truth, which should be our truth because it's our bodies. But the minute you point something out, you are definitely open um, for especially, well, I wouldn't even say it's all men. Some women actually get rather their feathers in a bunch when we try to approach these subjects. I think because it's been taboo, you know.
Mhm.
Um,
I've definitely like to jump in, like that's definitely something I've experienced, like the amount of times I've been told that I'm not ladylike.
mhm,
It's like, well, what is ladylike? This is my ladylike.
yeah.
Um, so it is interesting. And actually, when I participated in a Bloody Valentine's Day event here in the Springs, it was
Mhm,
my first kind of like public writing event. I didn't have my collection or anything out at that point, so I was just kind of there and to read something. And it was to celebrate all female writers in the horror industry. And I had a man come up to me and he's like, oh, so do you just, are you just gonna kill a bunch of men in your stories? That's what female writers do. And I was like so taken aback. I was like, you've never read anything of mine. Like, I kill everyone. Like,
yeah,
but
exactly.
like a part
Everybody's
of,
fair game.
it kind of put me on the spot where I was like, it was my first like author event, so I wasn't as sassy in person as I am now.
Mhm,
But I remember thinking like, what women do to men in horror, like can we talk about like everything that's been done to women in horror, like the amount of times I've seen a poor actress have to show her titties just to die like straight afterwards. Sorry, YouTube, for the word
mhm.
titties, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. Or like the extended scenes, whether it's in a book or a horror movie, like it isn't just rape scenes are never written how women experience them.
Yeah.
They're always long drawn out and sexualized, as if it is something somehow that somebody wants going on. It's unnecessary. And for as many times as you've seen in books and movies, like you were saying, women running around with their boobs hanging out in their underwear, trying to get away from the monster and then eventually getting raped or killed or both. It just that's a trope. And it's a trope.
Mhm.
I don't know necessarily that it's going to go away, but it certainly is something that women need to subvert,
Mhm.
because horror has this ability to transcend beyond just the feelings of dread and fright, but to actually speak to social issues of the day. And so for women, it's an excellent place for us to be able to express some of the horror and dread that we face daily, you know, that we experience when, taking an Uber. Oh, does your husband live with you? I mean, I
Yeah.
had that at least twice this week, just getting Ubers, it's like, dude, I'm like almost 50, like chill out.
Yeah.
How are you? Would you ask, a male rider in your car if would you, well, maybe you would, I don't know, but
Yeah, who knows.
yeah, just the questions and things that we have to deal with daily is well, it's horrific, and it's no different in the horror industry. I can't tell you how many times I've gone to a conference or something and men are dressed like men. I don't know why women feel it necessary to, I'm not saying women shouldn't wear what they want and everything, but the women are way more sexualized, um, and encounter a lot more problems at conferences and are treated you know, not the same way as male peers in a lot of instances. I had an incident at StokerCon, that was just rather creepy, and if I had been a man, would I have experienced that same thing? Maybe, but probably the likelihood would have gone way down, you know?
Mhm.
And
Yeah, I think one thing they never have to deal with is like, I know when I'm going out, I assess like, how late am I going to be out? Is there a chance that I'm not going to be in a group? And that will dictate like the clothes I wear. Like,
yeah.
I'm not going to wear a dress if I'm going out alone, like, to be
Mhm.
completely honest, unless it's like for a breakfast date.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, whereas like a guy will just be like, I'll just wear whatever I want. And it's like,
Mhm.
must be nice.
Yeah. Or the, you know, and it can go opposite ways too. The level of professionalism when going to a conference or something, women have a different expectation than the men, you know, as far as how we're supposed to present ourselves at such places. And then you have the men running around in their jeans and 2-day dirty t-shirts, you know. It's just it's this whole spectrum, right,
Mhm.
of expectations that differ, and still there's still not equity in that way
Mhm.
for women at
Yeah,
all.
I feel like the horror industry is, I mean, obviously I write in it. It's my favorite genre. It's my favorite uh space for creating stories and art, but at the same time, like it is kind of hostile for anyone who's not part of the norm, which for the longest time was the white male, middle-aged
Hmm.
white man. And
Yeah.
so it's hard to break into that. I mean, if we, to deviate a bit more, like if we look at the new Predator movie, Prey, how many
Hmm.
people jumped on that? It was like, I actually started rewatching them. The second one is so like bad. Like I'm a big Alien fan. I love the
Hmm.
xenomorph. So I was like, how does this even
Too.
compare? Like how does this even have a following? Like the second movie was like not great. And it only got revamped after the Alien versus Predator series, which I guess gave it new life. I was like, Prey is like probably the best movie of the, like in my opinion, it's better even than the first. Please don't come at me, Predator fans.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll put
No.
you in my stories if you do.
Yeah, to see a strong female um part in Prey, and then not only that, it's an indigenous person too, right?
Mhm.
um it just had it really spoke for itself, unapologetically, of what it was doing, I really feel. And that's, to me, it was that made it that much more strong. And I found myself just, I couldn't stop watching it because I was just like, you know, go get that thing,
I know, it's so
you know.
good.
I was like, now that is the kind of horror that I want to be writing, because it had so many themes playing in it that were positive, finally,
Mhm.
um, in the horror world. And I guess you could say sci-fi as well, for women in
Yep.
general, and for indigenous voices as well. And honestly, to be representing an indigenous female voice um, right now, in this time period, you know, in the time we find ourselves, what better time for it to come out, because that is also another area of of I'm trying to find the word. It's not intertextual, but just the diversity, and the
Mhm.
way that you aren't just a, you know, we aren't defined by just being female. We are many other things, and so many of us that cross boundaries or whatever, um end up being doubly silenced, I think, you
Mhm.
know, and stuff. So for the indigenous young girl who's watching horror, because, you know, young girls love horror, to be able to see herself in a movie, how exciting is that? Like, that's just been too long in coming. Like, make more
Mhm.
for that population of young teenage girl that needs heroes like that today, you know, a final girl that they can
Yeah.
really, you know, reach out to.
Then I do want to move on to talking about your collection because it was amazing. But then I guess usually I ask the people on the show, like what's one piece of advice they give to new writers. But I think this is a good topic to kind of keep on. It's like, what is one piece of advice you'd give to any writer writing a female character or a female identifying character, so as not to fall into those negative toxic tropes, whether that writer be a female identifying or a male identifying writer?
Um, I think you need to ask yourself, why? Why am I going to write that character? And then if you are going to be a person who isn't, a female writing, are you going to do your due diligence in research and talking to women and asking them how they actually would react to things, and I think I had to do that in many ways in my own book. Like, I had to have sensitivity readers. I am not indigenous, so I needed to have sensitivity readers for that. I am not a Chicano Hispanic from the Valley. So again, I have to have sensitivity writers. So you have to be willing to admit you don't know everything. It isn't just, you're not doing yourself any favors by saying, well, it's my character and I'm going to make them how I want my character to be. Like, part of that is true, it's your character. But if you're writing of a certain culture or a different ethnicity or a different race or something like that, you need to do your homework. And if you don't, then just be ready. Be ready
Yeah.
for those critical eyes to be telling you, it's your work. Like, this is my work, and I spent a lot of time doing it. I did not cut corners in writing this book. I also, it's my master's thesis, so I wasn't allowed to cut corners. But even in my next book that is almost done, it's going to have to go through sensitivity readers, because I do have some Chicano Hispanic characters in it, because again, I'm writing about the San Luis Valley. So I'm going to have sensitivity readers who are of that heritage to read it, and tell me where I went wrong, or maybe I misrepresented. And you have to be willing to rewrite those sections too, that so you have critical, sensitive eyes reading. You have to be willing to let your ego go and get in there and do the hard work, because it would be really flat if I just wrote about Anglo people, right?
Yeah.
I would just be also perpetuating the very white writing out there. That's not to say that there's other voices out there that have a lot more to say. But it's impossible to write about the San Luis Valley without representing the voices of the valley, but because of that, you have to do your work, you have to ask questions, you have to do your research, and you definitely have to have sensitivity readers when you're doing that. So just know that writing a book, if it were easy, more people would be successful writers out there. It's not, some people are like, go out there, write that book, you can do it, da da da. That's true, but it is a lot of work, as we both know, and a lot of rewriting and edits.
Like, especially if you want to write a book that will be successful. Like, if you want to appeal just to a tiny audience, you can, but other people are going to read your book, and then their reviews are going to reflect the fact that perhaps your female characters or your ethnic characters are not good, to say nicely, So yeah, I think, and it's easy enough to find sensitivity readers. Like, it's writers want to be helping other writers. Like, you can pretty much go onto any online community and find them. So writers out there do that.
And if you're going to write a woman, then if you're a male writing a woman, you probably know a female that you could ask.
At least one.
Would you do this?
Yeah.
Would you put your dress on this way? Would you look at yourself in the mirror this way? You know, would
Yes,
you say
fun fact, most women don't stand in front of the mirror staring at their nipples.
we just, yeah, we don't.
Yeah, we just don't.
Mm-mm.
We don't like, we're not like hyper aware of our boobs as we run down the stairs
We
most of the
don't
time.
have time to do that in most
Yeah.
instances. We just don't have time,
I
you know?
often wondered how funny it would be if like somebody wrote like a parody of a male character who like runs
Oh,
testicularly down the stairs, you know?
I know. And as a female writer that does write male characters, it never once entered my mind to like make any of their actions like hyper sexualized in the ways that men do when they write women. Like it never even occurred to me. Like I don't understand. Like you have to sit there and make a conscious decision
Mhm.
to make something like putting on your shirt before you're taking the kids to school or something in a book to make it hypersexualized. Like something's going on in your brain that isn't based in reality,
Mhm.
and that's the problems, right? That's the problems we find when we're reading those books and we're like, especially if you're a
Yeah.
writer and you're like kind of always critiquing in your head, like, what the heck was this guy thinking? Was he drinking when he was writing this? Like, what's going on?
Yeah. I feel like and again, no offense to you writers out there, but I can usually like even if I don't look at the author's name, if I get to a certain like section like if it's a female character, how the author has her describe herself, I can usually guess if
Mhm.
the author is male identifying. Um,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
that it's like, and I'm sorry, but it's bad. It's usually it's like, and then I'll check the name and I'll be like, hopefully
Hmm.
it's not like
Yeah.
this the whole time.
So true.
um, okay, but let's dig in to, and I actually have a hard copy this time. Usually I have to like Photoshop or like edit in uh a picture of the cover because I have digital arcs, but I actually have a copy of Blood Mountain.
I had a fun time sending that to you.
Yeah.
It was pouring down rain and my umbrella was misbehaving, and it was New Orleans, so the streets were flooding, and then I ended up in this little shop because I don't have a post office near me. So I went into this little postal shop and it had all these cool things and stickers and just craziness. And it
Is that
was,
where you got the voodoo sticker that you sent me?
mhm.
I was
Yeah.
wondering, I was like, is this like something she made, like or commissioned?
No, no, it was something from the city. So I was just like having so much fun picking
Uh,
out stickers to send because I sent out 3 books that day and it was, yeah, and then
oh,
adorable.
oh, there we go. I've been using it as a bookmark.
Yeah, I think it's like a local artist that makes them and stuff, but yeah, it was fun.
Oh,
It was,
so again, here we have
yeah.
Brenda's collection, Blood Mountain. I have to put it in front of me for the background to not fade it out.
And that artwork, it's through Raw
Yes.
Dog Screaming Press, but that artwork's through Daniel Sierra, who
Yes.
is a fantastic, like that. I was hoping that they might get him. I had no idea that they did until I found out. And then I was just like, oh my God, he's making my cover. Oh my God.
It is beautiful. Again, I wonder if I
Yeah,
can get it.
he really, just when I saw that, I knew he read it. Like he knew my book.
Mhm.
And that doesn't often happen, when you're getting a cover, because you don't get really much say in the cover, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
And stuff. So I knew he had actually like paid attention when he made that cover. So I was super excited. That's
So then, as spoiler free as possible, can you tell us kind of what the stories in this collection are about?
so I think you want to chat about this later, but the collection is what they call a composite novel. Um, I actually got the idea from uh, Steinbeck. Steinbeck and actually Gambino and Glacius did this for one of his books too, where you have these like one whole story throughout that's holding all the other stories, and it's place based, so it is centered in one place. Steinbeck did it with Pastures of Heaven, which is a Gothic novel of his that most people don't even know about, but now you do, so you should go get it and read it because it's gorgeous. But I decided to tell the story through those little insets of um, of a sheriff, who's having to deal with all these crimes and stuff throughout the valley. And then so he kind of holds the book together per se. And then each story is like basically something like a crime maybe he worked on, but you get to, it's like playing with perspective a little bit. So you go from his view, and then you get to dive into the story and experience the story, and then you come back up for air with him. And the whole time throughout the book, he is considering whether he wants to continue living or not. Like, he is really struggling because of everything he's seen throughout his years in law enforcement.
Mhm.
And
Then,
oh, go ahead.
continue.
Oh, no, I was just gonna say, and that's where the stories are ripped out of various places, from research to stories other people have told me symbolically, experiences that I have had, or other people have had and told me. So it's a, yeah.
And then so I'll skip to that question since it's a good
Yeah.
segue. What made you decide to style your collection in that way? And again, so each story is separated by a chapter and second person from the eyes of the sheriff. And you kind of explain where you got the idea, but what made you decide to format your collection in this manner? Because honestly, this is the first time I've read one that was done this way, and I really liked it.
So I had the collection. It's my master's thesis through Regis University. And my committee, so Dr. David Hicks and Mario Acevedo, who's actually a big name there, your side of the mountains. They loved the stories, but they thought they needed to be held together, like with a common thread. And of course, I'm not gonna lie, by that time I was almost so sick of my stories that I was just like, ugh, I don't want to go back and write more and stuff. And so I was like, I'm gonna be like Italia Calvino, and if on a winter's night a traveler, I'm just gonna do these weird little second person insets and see how they like that. Well, they liked it, so so it stayed in the
So then
book.
you were stuck.
Yeah, I thought I was being rebellious, and it turns out they knew, as my thesis committee should know, they knew what was best for the book, and I was the newbie, and I needed to listen to my Yodas. And so because of their great mentorship, the book ended up in the form that it's in now. And I learned a lot of lessons. I learned a lot of lessons. And, like Mario's published, I don't even know how many books. And then Dr. David Hicks himself is published, is pretty published too. So, and how can you not listen to the advice of those two,
Sometimes it's a hard learning curve, though.
Yeah, well, because it's all ego and pride, right?
Mhm.
Everybody does this. We get writing something, and we have, on the one hand, we think it's the worst thing in the world, and on the other hand, we are like, this is great. I wrote something great. And on the other hand, then you're like, this is horrible. This is so horrible. And you kind of teeter
Yeah, you
between
go
the
back and
two.
forth.
Yeah. I mean, ask me on a different day if I like my book, and I'll give you a different answer, probably.
Then, of the stories in this collection, which was the hardest to write and why?
They were all hard in their own way. Snake Man wasn't really that hard because I found Snake Man, I ripped that right out of a newspaper story about a man who got pulled over with a bunch of rattlesnakes in the back of his car. Like that's a real story I pulled out of the news, you know, and I just found that so hilarious. So I was
Just
just,
wanted to have a good time.
yeah, yeah. Um, I, one that was very difficult for me was Seraphim, and that's the last story. And when I say I take things that I've gone through, like in my life, and use writing as a sort of therapy to kind of get through certain traumas and stuff, Seraphim I wrote during the week that I found out, and then of course had to go deal with my brother passed away from overdose, opioid overdose, and he is one of thousands. And the uptick in opioid related overdoses went really high during COVID, and it still hasn't come down. I have actually lost now three family members to that.
I'm sorry. That's hard.
Yeah, but I'm not the only one. So many people, so many mothers and, you know, mothers and fathers and friends and family and brothers and sisters have lost somebody from this addiction, and those that are addicted often get blamed for their addiction as if they could have prevented it. But if you've almost like if you've when there was addiction when I was younger, that was one thing. There was a little bit more hope then because the drugs weren't as terrible, horrible. They were terrible, horrible, but they weren't as addictive as the opioid and fentanyl crisis that our country finds itself in now. And it's almost impossible if you're, you know, addicted, and fentanyl's and everything, you know, it just
Mhm.
is, you know, and stuff. So when people, I had a hard time through that because a lot of people were um, not helpful during that process and very blaming of my brother for his addiction. And I know if he could have changed it, he would have, but that wasn't the case. So and the way he died and all the circumstances with it and dealing with family and different things like that was, and my mother's grief and my own grief, I started writing it the day that I found out he had passed. Like the words were just coming to my mind. So was it hard? Yes, but it was also in some ways one of the most easiest things to write because I was writing my grief the entire time.
Mhm.
And there's other ones, Slaughter Lodge, um, dealing with you know, people in particular, gurus and people in places of power who prey upon young girls,
Mhm.
um, gaslighting them and everything until they've utterly destroyed young women, um, or using their places of power to elicit harm onto the female body. And Slaughter Lodge is odd in that I'm not taking like a right-wing view, I guess, when I use the gaze of pregnancy and abortion, um, because I see it from both sides, right, and extreme right and extreme left, of this war upon the female body, and the victimizing that women can perpetrate onto other women who have made particular choices. And we see this a lot in the world. And that was kind of hard. Like those three stories, I would say, were the hardest for me to write because there was real pain and trauma going into the writing of them. But I also feel like as a female horror writer, it is part of the the calling to write, to be able to speak to issues that help with the liberation of others. And, you know, whether that's people in the LGBTQ plus family, women, you know, I think we got to use whatever talents we have to help in the liberation of others. And as
Mhm.
much as we can, even if it is horror that is grim and dark and gross in some cases.
I mean, arguably, the human experience can be horrific and gross without, adding horror themes to it. So,
Mm.
oh my God. My allergies have been bad, so FYI, that's why my nose is all pink. So sorry.
Yeah, no, I actually put cortisone under my eyes because the allergies and the ragweed
Oh,
and the air here in New Orleans is terrible. I'm
what
so
does
sorry.
that do? That for puffiness?
I did it in desperation this morning because
Yeah.
my eyes were super puffy and very itchy, and I didn't want to be like scratching my eyes out,
Yeah.
and giving a horror show on your
Yeah, I
show.
know.
So,
We're both like,
and
here's the
strangely,
female body. It's
yeah, and
messy.
strangely enough, it's working. My eyes aren't that itchy. I mean, don't go
Yeah.
out and slather a bunch of cortisone on your eyes because I am not a medical expert. I was just desperate, and it seems to be working so far.
I realized like as soon as we started the interview, I was like, I didn't take an allergy pill today. This is gonna be awful. And yeah, my nose has been like kind of, oh well, trying my best. We're
You're
all
good.
trying our best.
You're good. You're good.
So yeah, so the with the heavy topics, I feel like it can be interesting that the horror genre, it can be very enthusiastic about approaching some difficult topics, but so afraid of others. Like, I mean, rape is such a large feature throughout the genre, but if you have abortion,
Mhm.
that is often like really hit hard in reviews. Like they'll be like, oh, I can't believe you'd bring this up, or such and such. And Blood Mountain, for people who should read it because it's an amazing collection, it does deal with a lot of these really difficult topics, but I think these are topics that should be dealt with. Like, to act like they are too taboo to write stories about is part of the problem, because by hiding or like trying to sweep them under the rug, we're not dealing with it. And that's part of the issue. These things should be discussed and talked about, whether in mainstream media or in fiction, because if you hide it, then you're just silencing women in a different way.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think um I especially try to mirror the female body with the body of the earth,
Mhm.
which is a topic I actually talk about academically too. It's like you can see what's going on with women's bodies is symbolically happening to the earth at the same time.
Mhm.
So when I'm talking very realistically about rape, you know, I'm trying to do it realistically. I know I have one scene in my book where I describe it, the character is almost like vacating her body, because that is something that actually happens when they're like, well, why didn't you try harder? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you? Well, the
Mhm.
fact is, most women, when they're going through that, um, are not, we're a lot of cases, we're detaching, like mentally detaching from what's happening because it's the only way to survive it, you know? Um, and when I'm talking about abortion, and like in my book, it's already happened, I talk about um, some of the ways in which like whole communities of the people around you, um, whole communities of an entire country can come back, and try to rectify it or dictate what's, happening to the body. And that's what's happening now. That is what's happening now. When I wrote that story, I sent it out to a lot of different places, and it got rejected for being too over the top, too gruesome. That would never happen. Women have the right to abortion when I wrote that. And
Mhm. And now
now,
look.
yeah, and
Yeah.
now a woman in the state of Louisiana where I'm at has a has a defect going on, and she can't get an abortion here in the state of Louisiana. So she's going to have to actually travel outside. Because what did she say? She said, I'm going to have to carry this baby to bury this baby. That's what, like the baby won't survive. It's not viable. To ask a woman who's been raped, or a young child who's been raped or experienced incest, to have to carry a baby. It's mind blowing to me. That is true horror, and we're living in it. I didn't, I mean, and those were things I was thinking about when I was writing it, but I had no idea like Stone Mother was gonna be relevant. I didn't want it to be relevant.
Yeah, you wrote it to be horror, and now it's becoming more
Mhm.
realistic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's an experience that so many women, all women, not so many, all women, all women are facing, all girls, and it's mind blowing that this would be happening now. But this is why more women need to be writing horror. This is because horror gives us a place where we can transcend those boundaries of what is proper or not. It's
Mhm.
really a place where we can speak our absolute truth
Yeah.
and be very vocal about it, So, and a lot more women are. A lot more women are, I'm actually thinking of Evie's 3 Days in the Pink Tower.
And that's
Um,
Bram Stoker award-winning author Evie Knight. You can
yeah.
follow on Twitter.
Yeah, and she actually she's had, and then she wrote another one postpartum, that those books are transcending what it means to be a female writer. Like, I find her humongously brave. I could start listing authors. There's just a lot more women authors who are stepping up and really
Mhm.
writing some wickedly truthful, wonderful books that hopefully make people, not only are they entertained because it's horror, but they're also thinking about those bigger issues, you
Mhm.
know.
Well, since you mentioned this before, so Blood Mountain does focus a lot on the setting, which are the mountains, and of nature, and ties it with what it means to be uh, a woman, a girl, and also a lot like tied a lot with motherhood. Did you want to dive a bit deeper into that and what made you choose that theme?
um I think, again, just being unapologetically female, um who's lived life, and um when you write, the best writing you can do is writing that you can speak to, you know, that you have some sort of inside knowledge of, and that's the inkwell that I draw from in many ways. But then the other part of it is, especially in the San Luis Valley and its history with colonization and mining practices there, and the Spanish Trail, and just the loss of land to the indigenous who were there, and then the predominantly Hispanic population, probably Hispanic and indigenous, who again, like, were there and then had their lands taken away. The stripping of the land that's going on even now with climate change, and water loss in the valley, the rivers historically being low, the snowpack being not what it needs to be for the survival of the land, and not just the plants and the animals and all of that, but also the people who have historically lived there. I think it's through those, um, that dichotomy, I guess, of the earth again and the female body, and what's taken from one is mirrored in the taking of the other. You know, if we're going to talk about the female body and rape, then think about the drilling and the fracking and the climate change in general, you know, on the other. And then also the idea of motherhood and choice, again, you know, whether to become a mother, even if you choose to become a mother, being pregnant and having babies is a very odd thing. There's no doubt in my mind that that wasn't in the mind. You know, we know that was in somewhat in the mind when they were penning the script for Alien. You know,
Yeah.
it is symbiotic and parasitic, you know, experience, and it's very, very strange. There's no other that this being pregnant is, and I was pregnant with twins, so you know, there's no stranger experience than that, having something else living inside of you, and then what comes from when you have to have a child. And so those kinds of things come up a lot when I'm doing my writing, but then it also brings in father, like the father figure, the absent father, the um the way that men work that is so different from the way women work, you know, as far as in the role of family. And that's not all men, but you know, just like I know that I do talk about the strangeness of fatherhood and like father-daughter relationships in a lot of my stories. You know, and that comes definitely from experiences, of course, but it makes me wonder about choices that are made by being a parent, whether being a father or whether being a mother. Like, what is that? What are the roles and rules behind that? And, you know, when they get broken, what happens? You know, when homes are broken, what happens um, to all of the players involved, whether that be children, men or women, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah, so I don't know if I answered that right, but I was just like,
Well, let's end on a high note about your collection. Do you have a favorite story in Blood Mountain?
oh, well, like I was saying, Snake Man it's just fun to read. It's so
Mhm.
fun to read.
It
It's
was very fun. It was one of my
yeah,
favorites.
and it's fun to read live because it starts off, I think it's pretty hilarious. Um, and just knowing that part of it is a true story that I just, you know, definitely pulled out of the newspaper just makes it that much more funny. And if you spent any time in the San Luis Valley, you know that you have these really odd characters, you know, that are like the characters in that story. I think Blood Mountain for sure is my probably my favorite, and that's why the book's, you know, called that. The mythology or the pseudo mythology behind the book really follows that the consumption, the cannibalistic eating of resources, taking of the female body, um, just that never-ending hunger and willing to destroy anything to get at whatever it is you're hungering for. I think that theme that runs through Blood Mountain, the story, also runs throughout the entire book. Um, and I wouldn't say it was the most fun to write because it was my first story, and I wrote parts of it, and then I saw Stephen Graham Jones and Mario Acevedo read they delivered they read some of their stories at my residency at Regis, and I was like, oh my God. And I went back to my dorm room and I trashed 25 pages of that story and just started from scratch. Um, I think that is definitely my favorite because it also was where I learned the most, and of course I was working with Mario on, on the pages after that. So,
Mhm.
I'm getting my doctorate and I'm almost 50. So, obviously I think, the punishment of academia and rewrites is fun. Probably not, but yeah.
I think you just admitted to being like masochistic or something. It's
Yeah,
fine.
maybe a little bit. Yeah.
So then, uh, with your up and coming, are you working on anything right now?
Yeah. So I did finish a book of poetry, and hoping that that will come out in the near future. But my first full-fledged actual novel from beginning to end with no games and no playing, no fun. Actually, no, I take it back. It does have some insets in it. I still use that in this one. Um, this one, I don't, I'm so close to being done, so close. But I don't really push my writing on a deadline. Otherwise, it's going to be awful. So
Mm.
I'm getting very close to the end, and it's actually the beginning of the story is what Raw Dog saw me read at StokerCon, and that's what they were interested in. So
Ooh,
maybe I get them to take this one once it's done, but it's in the 80,000 range now, so it's getting there.
it's pretty
I'm
good.
Yeah, I'm always writing. I haven't been writing as many short stories though. Yeah, I've kind of taken a break from that because they always end up way too long anyway. So I might as well just write a novel, right?
Yep, pretty much, may as well.
Yeah.
And then besides writing, you also do the podcast. I don't know if you want
Mhm.
to shout that out and what that's about.
Yeah, so we have Joy Yaley and I have the Burial Plot Horror podcast, and it comes out whenever we get around to getting our interviews, and they usually come out in weird little bursts, like here's 2 episodes, and then we take a little break. But that is on Spotify and Apple and pretty much anywhere you can get a podcast. Matter of fact, we have you on one of
Yay.
ours, and we're going to have you again
Yeah.
soon with your new wonderful book coming out that already has some great blurbs.
I know. Thank you for that.
Yeah, yeah. So we're doing that, and then it's slow to start, but we have Ouroboros Writers Workshop that should be getting its start in October. Yeah,
Did you want to talk a little about that as well?
so that's a platform for, in particular, those who historically end up kind of marginalized, I guess, in the horror world. So we're focusing mostly on LGBTQ plus A, feminine, and POC, people of color, voices to workshop, very low cost to no cost, just workshops to help that segment of writers to get started or improve their writing, or offer resources that commonly don't always aren't always out there for
Mhm.
that segment. So, and that's Bobby Crew, who and
Mhm.
Joy Yaley and myself, and that's actually coming out of support from Hillary Leftwich. Her Alchemy Writers Workshop and Author Services is who is helping us be able to do that. And she's just a wonderful, wonderful support to writers. So
Awesome. And I'll put a link to that in your podcast below in the description of the video so people can go straight there if they want to check it
yeah,
out.
that'd be
And
wonderful.
now
Thank you.
the final question.
Oh no.
Yeah. What is your favorite food and why is it mac and cheese?
Oh my gosh, that's funny. Um, I guess it's kind of wide noodled mac and cheese, but it's actually lasagna. Although I do love macaroni and cheese with hot dogs in it. I've never outgrown
Hot
that.
dogs. Okay.
Yeah, that's just poor people food.
I
that
mean, I
my
love mac and cheese, so I don't want to hear it.
No, my mom, so my mom worked, she was a single parent, most of my young life. And we ate a lot of mac and cheese with hot dogs in it. And it's just a favorite food. And it was filling and it was cheap. And it's still like comfort food, especially on days like today where it's like all rainy out and everything. But lasagna, I've always loved lasagna, but my daughter Layla, at least once a week, makes her famous lasagna, and it is so good. And I don't
Okay,
have to cook it.
what's
Come
the
from,
secret behind her famous lasagna then?
I'm not really sure. It has something to do with ricotta cheese and whatever spices she throws in there. It's funny because 2 years ago that girl couldn't boil water, and now she cooks like a gourmet chef. It is amazing. Yeah, when she's not out doing her archaeology thing in the field, she's here cooking up a storm. I never thought I'd see the day. And I don't cook anymore.
There you go, win-win.
And when I do cook, it's macaroni and cheese and hot dogs.
And hot dogs.
And
See,
hot
my
dogs.
family was all the macaroni and cheese with ketchup
Oh,
on
I do
top.
that. I do that too.
See, thank you. I have so many people who are like, that sounds disgusting. That's so weird. And I'm like, it's not a weird thing. People do it. It's good.
Do you take the leftover macaroni and put it on hamburgers the next day?
That does sound good. Usually there is no leftovers when I use the Kraft dinner box. Like
Mhm.
usually it's just all eaten.
You should save a little and then make hamburgers the next day and put that on the hamburgers.
See, that sounds good. And then hamburgers naturally have ketchup on it.
I
So,
know. So you should try that. It's really, really good.
okay. Well, thank you so much for joining me and talking about horror and women, but
Yeah.
also your collection, Blood Mountain, which people can pick up.
Mhm.
They can get it on Amazon, if I remember correctly, or by going to Raw Dog Screaming's website.
Mhm.
So that will also be linked below. I would recommend it. It's brutal, it's beautiful, it has an amazing cover.
Yeah. Raw Dog
And
did a wonderful job. They are awesome press, I will say that.
and again, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.